Bal Pinguel is, I have to just say, on a personal note, one of my heroes. Bal was the director of the Peacebuilding and Prevention of Conflict program for AFSC. And prior to his work in AFSC, Bal was an anti-dictatorship activist and a founding officer of Bayan, the largest anti-dictatorship grassroots coalition in the Philippines during the martial law years. He was the director of the Popular Struggle Commission of Bayan that developed the concept of Welgang Bayang, or People's Strike. Welgang Bayan was ultimately embraced by the Filipino people in the nonviolent overthrow of Philippine dictator Fernando Marcos. The EDSA revolution of 1986 in the Philippines was the first in what is termed now as People Power Revolution. It is my honor to have Bal come and tell his story. Here's Bal.
Thank you, Jody. That was a very wonderful introduction. Regarding my story, as mentioned by Jody, I was an anti-dictatorship activist in the Philippines. In fact, before the imposition of martial law in the Philippines in 1972, I was the national spokesperson of the largest youth organization in the Philippines called Kabataang Makabayan, which at the time in 1971 embraced around 75,000 members all over the Philippines. It was such militant organizations, and together with other organizations, we protested the issues at the time. Firstly, in Southeast Asia, because that is where the Philippines is located, we object to the fact that the Philippines was involved in the war in Vietnam. And we want our country to disengage itself from Vietnam because we were sending troops like people engineering kind of, company or something that were constructing the roads and the bridges that were being used by the U.S. in the counterinsurgency war in Vietnam. And then that opened my eyes a little bit further to look into the very issues in my own country. And behold, through that involvement, I became aware about the existence of the U.S. military bases in the Philippines. The largest military bases of the U.S. was in the Philippines at that time. If you take contiguously the several bases that we have, like Clark Air Base and Subic Naval Base, it encompasses a land territory that is larger or it's equivalent to the country of Singapore. That is how large the U.S. military base was. It was never a part of the Philippine territory. It was a place where the flag of the U.S. perpetually unfurled and waved since 1898, after the conquest of the Philippines from Spain. At any rate, the struggle that I participated in was the anti-dictatorship struggle, because we used to have a president called Ferdinand Marcos, who was one of the most loyal, I might say, president in Southeast Asia, because the Philippines was always the site for the meetings that the Southeast Asia Treaty Organization was doing in relation to Vietnam. And so a lot of demonstration taking place in the Philippines also targeted the fact that our president was very compliant to what the U.S. wanted to do or was doing in Vietnam. So that was my first involvement in the anti-Vietnam struggle. And in a span of 1 year, I think the organization and the movement grew so large to a point that from the perspective of the Philippine dictator Marcos, and I think from the perspective of the people behind Marcos, like the U.S. government, this was a serious threat to their existence. So martial law was declared September 1972, and I, being one of the more outspoken leader at the time, was immediately transformed into a wanted personality, and there were posters and rewards for my arrest. I eluded arrest for more than a year, and then I got arrested while organizing a student in another part of outside Manila. But I think I only stayed in prison for 1.5 months, and then with 8 others, we did the first mass jailbreak in Philippine martial law history. And I can tell you that it's one of the most fascinating experiences a person can have. And for more than 7 years, I was successful in eluding the Philippine military until I got arrested in 1986 in the urban center of Cebu, which is the second largest city in the Philippines. That was the site of the maquilas. Before they had maquiladoras in Mexico, they had the maquiladora in the Philippines, in the island of Cebu, where multinational corporations can stay without any taxes whatsoever. And such was the place that labor unions and labor organizing was banned in these maquilas. That's why it was such a big issue. Anyway, because my presentation is limited to 10 minutes, I'll probably just say that after I was imprisoned and held without trial for almost 5 years, there was a campaign for my release, and I'm very thankful for Amnesty International because I became a priority case, being the only probably long-held political detainee without any trial. So a priority campaign was done in my, for my case, and I was able to get out of prison. When I was released from prison, I, as expected, became active in organizing again. Seems to me that I never learned any lesson with the more than 4 years of imprisonment. But I was involved in the founding of Bayan. It is an acronym. The word Bayan means people or country in Tagalog. But it was also an acronym for the largest anti-dictatorship coalition in the Philippines called Bagong Alyansang Makabayan, New Anti-Imperialist Coalition. And at the time when we founded it, there was, given the presence of large organizations under the umbrella of Bayan, we had, I think, more than 1 million members throughout the country because we had the largest trade union organization, the largest women coalition, the largest coalition of tribal Filipinos, organizations of Muslim Filipinos, youth and student organizations, urban poor, and peasants. So it was a very powerful organization. And the single agenda that we have was to oust the dictatorship. I know that some of the questions that will be asked today is there a shortcut in terms of doing people power revolution? In terms of doing a non-violent people power revolution? I don't want to disappoint you, but the answer is there's no shortcut. It has to be a painstaking organizing. You have to always conduct the perpetual task of any activist, any organizer, which is arouse, organize, and mobilize. You don't give any let up. You keep on doing that work. It is not, and probably this is where I have some, I don't know, divergence with what George Lake has said, because in his manifesto on nonviolence, he presented stages of, consciousness raising, organization building, and then confrontation. In our case, it was not a stage. It was a perpetual task. You always have to raise consciousness. You always have to build organizations, the kind of grassroots organizations. And if there are grassroots organizations, you have to build on alliances, and even temporary kind of alliances with other political parties or political organizations that doesn't necessarily see with you eye to eye, but at least you see one target in particular, which was the dictatorship. And then mobilization. You always have to have mobilization, especially in a context where martial law was declared and civil liberties were suspended. You always have to do mobilization, and the nature of your mobilization is one of confrontation, because you can never, go out and gather by yourselves. There was a presidential decree in the Philippines during martial law that 5 people who were, talking together in the streets was considered to be an illegal assembly, and you were liable for being arrested and put into prison. So every time we did an action, it was always to go to the point of George Lakey, confrontation. Confrontation doesn't necessarily mean violence. Confrontation is doing what you need to do, what is morally right, what is politically upright, but what is being prevented because the martial law and the civil liberties of people were suspended. It was in that process that finally, in 1986, we were able to do the non-violent people power revolution. As I said, it was a stage from a period when you cannot gather by yourselves. You know, if it was 5, it was people, it was illegal assembly. So we did it. We moved the barrier, so to speak, inch by inch, step by step. Where it was impossible, if they banned 5 people from coming, we came like 5 or 10, do a rally, what we describe in the Philippines as lightning rally. Probably something that will last only for 2 to 3 minutes, and then disperse. And then come back again, gather, and prolong your presence in the street until it became a common sight, and the people themselves became so emboldened to participate in the action. And that was how the People Power Revolution in the Philippines, which, when it gathered in the street, it was not even in a matter of 2 hours, 3 hours program. It was a 24-hour event. And people came in, some people go home, take shower, ate food, come back and return until the revolution happened. There's, of course, a sad side to the revolution, and this is actually the main point that I want to communicate to each and every one of you. You see, the People Power Revolution in the Philippines was the poster child of the latest technological, development at the time, which was cable news TV. CNN just came out, and CNN was covering the People Power Revolution on a daily basis. In fact, the term people power was not started by the Filipinos, but by CNN. And I personally was so mad about the term people power, because it is like a unit of work. It is like horsepower or people power. It should be people's power, especially the power of the people to take into their own hands their destiny and to march towards the fulfillment of your agenda, which is national independence and real democracy in the country. Okay, I'm agitating now. I have to calm down. So, it was...
You got a couple more minutes.
Okay. So anyway, CNN started that term, people power, and from then on, it was like the model that was followed by several countries. In China, they tried doing that at the Tiananmen Square incident. Of course, the kind of suppressions that they got from the government was so terrible. But it also happened elsewhere. In the Soviet Union, in Eastern Europe, they started calling themselves People Power Revolution. In fact, they even attached colors to the revolution, because we also started that thing in the Philippines. We called our revolution the Yellow Revolution. And why it was yellow? Because, I don't know, it was around the assassination of Senator Aquino, who was on exile here in the United States. And when he returned to the Philippines, he was assassinated right there at the airport. That was the trigger for a lot of, resistance that took place in the Philippines. And since he was coming home, somebody thought that the, Tony Orlando in the Dawn song about tie yellow ribbon around the old oak tree was so cool. And so especially the middle classes in the Philippines started tying yellow ribbons, and then at the financial district in the Philippines, where the stockbrokers would join the protest by throwing yellow confettis, because they were cutting the yellow book and scattering all these pages as a sign of protest. We were called the Yellow Revolution. And then, of course, we have the Velvet Revolution in Czechoslovakia or in the Czech Republic. There was the Orange Revolution in Georgia, or was it in Ukraine? I don't know now. But it became a model of so many revolutions. But to go back to my point, there was an outside force that created it. The sad side of the revolution is that while we undid a Marcos dictatorship, it really never resolved the social issues in the Philippines. In fact, because there was a failure to bring to justice the military, who were the enforcers of the law during the martial law years, this military, who became so conscious of their political power, pretty soon, even under a civilian government of Corazon Aquino, was dictating their terms. During the Aquino regime, we had which lasted for 6 years, from 1986 to, I cannot compute at the moment, but 6 years, yes, there were like 7 coup attempts against Aquino. And the given was that the military remained unreformed. It was and then the point is that when this happened, especially the last coup attempt against Aquino, the U.S. actually became involved. They flew fighter planes in Manila to deter the coup, the coup plotters from initiating their action. But my point is, there was an external interference in what happened. And even the fact that CNN coined the word people, power, and so on and so forth, you know that there were an external force that was behind it. A force that was able to, shall we say, detract the movement from addressing the social issues. If you look at what is happening or what has happened or what has not happened in Egypt, remember what happened in the Philippines. Because in Egypt, they had the military intact. And there will be no genuine democracy nor no genuine national freedom if that is the situation. And this is happening. If you look into Syria, why is that there is no support for the Syrian people struggled by the U.S.? It is because of certain geopolitical interests that the U.S. wants to maintain in the Middle East. And the same thing in Bahrain, where the majority are Shiite, but then if the Shiite comes into power, it will be a problem for the U.S., especially because it is dealing with Iran. So my point is, there are external forces that are preventing people power from happening. And this will continue. There will be more people power revolution in the world. And my last point to end is that to say that for people power to happen as a serious historical initiative of the people, it needs to happen first here in the United States. Because if the U.S. continues in its practice of interference, of changing the agenda of the people, simply because there is no people power here that really gives substance to the meaning of what is for the people and what is real political, economic, ideological, and spiritual power, then all revolutions in the world will still be dictated upon by the United States. And I am imparting this important message to you because I'm excited about what Occupy Philadelphia and so on and so forth is doing, but we need to come close more together and exchange experiences, because even within the movement, there are cleavages. There are natural barriers that prevent us from being a cohesive organization. And we need to have that discussion so that a real democratic revolution happen in the U.S. I'm not a U.S. citizen. And probably similar to Tom Paine, who was an English Quaker, who came to the U.S. and became active in the U.S. Revolution, in the English Revolution, in the French Revolution, and his bones are now missing because it got lost in the process of transferring from the U.S. to Britain. But at least he had one single faith in the Common Sense pamphlet. He was so excited about it because not so much, in terms of seeking redress with Britain, but the idea of establishing and building your own nation. That was throbbing in the heart of the American Revolution. So I'm just saying that there is an extension of kind of anticipation for the role of the United States. We have to have a genuine people powers struggle here in the U.S. so that inference and the ability of the people all over the world to go forward to their own agenda will happen if there is no interference from this country. I think I exceeded 10 minutes. Thank you very much.